45, and the police are outside, guys. Hopefully there's no shooting. Close to the hook. So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was, and then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians could hear him, and the word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless, and they were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Please come closer, he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me. Selling me here to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine that has ravaged land for 2 years will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve your many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you, and he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of this entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt. So come down to me immediately. You can live in the region of Goshen, where you can be near with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and everything you own. I will take care of you there, for there are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, your household and all your animals will starve. Then Joseph added, look, you can see for yourself. And so can my brothers, Benjamin, that I really am Joseph. Go tell my father of my honored posting here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you have seen, and then bring my father here quickly. Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. And then Joseph kissed each of his brothers, and wept over them. And after that, they began talking freely with him. I know the police is out there looking for somebody. Genesis 45, verse 16. Pharaoh invites Jacob to Egypt. The news soon reached Pharaoh's palace, and Joseph's brothers had arrived. Pharaoh and his officials were all delighted to hear this, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, this is what you must do. Load, pack animals, and hurry back to the land of Canaan, and then get your father and all your families and return here to me. I will give you the very best land in Egypt, and you will eat from the best that land, best of that land that produces." And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, take wagons from the land of Egypt to carry your little children and your wives and bring them. Bring your father here, and don't worry about your personal belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." And so the sons of Jacob did as they were told. Joseph provided them with clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 5 changes of clothes and 300 pieces of silver. And he also sent his father 10 male donkeys loaded with the finest products of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other supplies he would need on his journey. So Joseph sent his brothers off, and as they left, he called after them, "Don't quarrel about all of this along the way." And they left Egypt and returned to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. "Joseph is still alive," they told him, "and he is governor of all the land of Egypt." Jacob was stunned at the news. He couldn't believe it. But when they repeated to Jacob everything Joseph had told them, and when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry him, their father's spirit revived. Then Jacob exclaimed, "It must be true. My son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die." Where's the phone? 46. Sorry, I didn't know the NLT Bible.
46. Jacob's journey to Egypt. So Jacob set out for Egypt with all his possessions. And when he came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision. "Jacob, Jacob," he called. "Here I am," Jacob replied. "I am God, the God of your father," the voice said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make your family into a great nation. I will go with you down to Egypt, and I will bring you back again. But you will die in Egypt with Joseph attending to you." So Jacob left Beersheba, and his sons took him to Egypt. They carried him and their little ones and their wives in the wagons Pharaoh had provided for them. They also took all their livestock and all the personal belongings they had acquired in the land of Canaan. So Jacob and his entire family went to Egypt, sons and grandsons, daughters and granddaughters, all his descendants. These are the names of the descendants of Israel, the sons of Jacob, who went to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's oldest son. The sons of Reuben were Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul. Shaul's mother was a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah were Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah, though and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Puah, Jashub, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun were Sered, Elon, and Jalil. These were the sons of Leah and Jacob who were born in Padan Aram, in addition to their daughter Dinah. The number of Jacob's descendants, male and female, through Leah, was 33. The sons of Gad were Zephon, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Eradai, and Arlai. The sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah. Their sister was Sirah. Beriah's sons were Heber and Melchiel. These were the sons of Zilpah, the servant given to Leah by her father Laban. The number of Jacob's descendants through Zilpah was 16. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph's sons, born in the land of Egypt, were Manasseh and Ephraim. Their mother was Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. Benjamin's sons were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Muppim, Huppim, and Ard. These were the sons of Rachel and Jacob. The number of Jacob's descendants through Rachel was 14. The son of Dan was Husham. The sons of Naphtali were Jazeel, Guni, Jezer, and Shillem. These were the sons of Bilhah, the servant given to Rachel by her father Laban. The number of Jacob's descendants through Bilhah was 7. The total number of Jacob's direct descendants who went with him to Egypt, not counting his sons' wives, was 66. In addition, Joseph had 2 sons who were born in Egypt. So altogether, there were 70 members of Jacob's family in the land of Egypt. Jacob's family arrives in Goshen. As they neared their destination, Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the region of Goshen. And when they finally arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and traveled to Goshen to meet his father Jacob. When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept, holding him for a long time. Finally, Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen your face again, and know you are still alive." And Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's entire family, "I will go to Pharaoh and tell him, 'My brothers and my father's entire family have come to me from the land of Canaan. These men are shepherds and they raise livestock. They have brought with them their flocks and herds and everything they own.'" Then he said, "When Pharaoh calls for you and asks you about your occupation, you must tell him, 'We, your servants, have raised livestock all our lives, as our ancestors have always done.' When you tell him this, he will let you live here in the region of Goshen, for the Egyptians despise shepherds."
Jacob, Genesis chapter 47 now. Jacob blesses Pharaoh, and then Joseph went to see Pharaoh and told him, "My father and my brothers have arrived from the land of Canaan. They have come with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and they are now in the region of Goshen." Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked the brothers, "What is your occupation?" They replied, "We, your servants, are shepherds, just like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt for a while, for there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe there, so please, we request permission to live in the region of Goshen." And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. Let them live in the region of Goshen, and if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too." Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. "How old are you?" Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, "I have traveled this earth for 130 hard years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before leaving his court. And so Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the region of Ramses, to his father and his brothers, and he settled them there just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided food for his father and his brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents, including the smallest children. Genesis chapter 47, verse 13. Joseph's leadership in the famine. And meanwhile, the famine became so severe, and all of the flood was used up, and people were starving throughout the lands of Egypt and Canaan. And by selling grain to the people, Joseph eventually collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan, and he put the money in Pharaoh's treasury. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, all the Egyptians came to Joseph. "Our money is gone," they cried, "but please give us food, or we will die before your very eyes." Joseph replied, "Since your money is gone, bring me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock." So they brought their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food, in exchange for their horses, flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and donkeys. Joseph provided them with food for another year. But that year and then in the next year, they came again and said, "We cannot hide the truth from you, my lord. Our money is gone, and all our livestock and cattle are yours. We have nothing left to give but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes? Your very eyes. Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we offer our land and ourselves as slaves for Pharaoh. Just give us grain so we may live and not die, and so the land does not become empty and desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and all the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe, and soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. As for the people, he made them all slaves from the end of Egypt to the other, and the only land he did not buy was the land belonging to the priests, and they received an allotment of food directly from Pharaoh, so they didn't need to sell their land. And then Joseph said to the people, "Look, today I have brought you in your land for Pharaoh, and I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then when you harvest it, 1/5 of your crop will belong to Pharaoh, and you may keep the remaining for your fifth, as seed for your fields, as food for you and your household and your little ones. You have saved our lives. You have saved our lives," they exclaimed. "May it please you, my lord, to let us be Pharaoh's servants." Joseph then issued a decree, still in effect in the land of Egypt, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown on his land. Only the land belonging to the priests was not given to Pharaoh. And meanwhile, the people of Israel settled in the region of Goshen in Egypt, and then they were acquired properly, and they were fruitful, and their population grew rapidly. And Jacob lived for 17 years after his arrival in Egypt. So he lived 147 years in all. And as the time of his death drew near, Jacob called for his son Joseph and said to him, please do me a favor, put your hand under my thigh, and swear that you will treat me with unfailing love by honoring the last request. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I die, please take my body out of Egypt and bury me with my ancestors. So Joseph promised, I will do as you asked. Swear that you will do it. Jacob assisted. So Joseph gave his oath, and Jacob bowed humbly at the head of his bed. Genesis chapter 46. No, 45. Joseph reveals himself to his brothers in Genesis chapter 45 in the commentary. I'm going to read now. In one of the most moving scenes in all the Bible, Joseph ordered his staff to go out of the room. While with an enormous emotional release, he revealed his identity to his brothers, and he told them not to grieve for the way they have treated him, because God was overruled it for the good. Genesis 45, verse 1, verse 8. Genesis 45, verse 9, verse 15, and they were to bring their father, their household, and their possessions to Goshen in Egypt for the remaining 5 years of famine, and tell my father of all my glory in Egypt. A command we too can obey when we rehearse before God the glories of his beloved Son. The fountains of the great deep were broken up as Joseph embraced Benjamin and kissed all his brothers. This is a happy preview of the joy that awaits the people of Israel when the Christ of Calvary appears to them and reveals himself as their Messiah King. Genesis chapter 45, verse 16, verse 24. And when Pharaoh heard that was what was going on, he told Joseph's brothers to bring their father and families from Canaan, but not to bother bringing their heavy furniture and goods, because he would provide everything they needed. And so they went back to Canaan with wagons provided by Pharaoh and with beautiful garments, animals, and provisions from Joseph. Benjamin got a gift of money and a special wardrobe, fearing that his brothers might accuse each other for their guilt in mistreating him. Years earlier, Joseph warned them not to quarrel on their homeward journey. Genesis 45, verse 25, verse 28. On reaching home, they broke the news to Jacob. At first, it was too much for him, but when he heard the full story and saw the loaded carts, he knew it was true. Joseph was still alive, and they would meet again. Joseph mentions his father 5 times in this chapter, and this reveals his Christ-likeness. In addition to the free forgiveness he attended to his brothers, it was our Lord's love for his Father and his desire to do the Father's will that brought him into the world to redeem fallen men. Joseph's love for Jacob is but a faint shadow of that love. Genesis chapter 46. Joseph's reunion with his family. Chapters 46, Genesis. Genesis chapter 46, verse 1 and verse 7. On the way to Egypt, Israel stopped the carving of historic Beersheba to worship the God of his father Isaac. And this was the place where God appeared to Abraham in connection with the offering of Isaac. Verse 21, 31, and 22, verse 2. It was also the place where the Lord appeared to Isaac in Genesis 26, verse 23, 24. And now he appears to Jacob to encourage him. This is the last of the Lord's 7 appearances to him. The second promise of verse 4 seems to indicate that Jacob would return to Canaan. Actually, of course, he died in Egypt, but the promise was fulfilled in two ways. His body was taken back to Canaan for burial. In a sense, he also returned when his descendants went back in the days of Joshua. The expression Joseph will put his hand on your eyes predicted a peaceful death. Atkinson explained the idiom beautifully. Joseph would close his father's eyes at the time of his death, and Joseph would be with him when he died. And notice the personal promise graciously made up to Jacob, which would compensate him for long years of sorrow and mourning for Joseph. God cares for the personal needs of his servants. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. And so Jacob reached Egypt with all his descendants, his livestock, and his personal goods. Genesis chapter 46, 8, verse 27. In verses 8, verse 27, we have the family register of Jacob and his sons, and there were 66 family members who came with Jacob to Egypt, and there are many difficulties in reconciling this figure with the 70 of verse 27 and of Exodus chapter 1, verse 5, and the 75 of Acts chapter 7, verse 14. The most obvious explanation is that the numbers span from direct descendants to wider circles of relatives. Genesis chapter 46, verse 28, verse 34. The epic meeting between Israel and Joseph took place in Goshen, the most fertile section of Egypt near the delta of the Nile. Jacob and his sons preferred to stay there since it provided the best pasture for their herds. It was agreed that they would tell Pharaoh that they were shepherds. Since shepherds were despised by the Egyptians, Pharaoh would let them live in the land of Goshen, far away from the royal palace. There in Goshen, they were isolated from social intercourse with the Egyptians, and first because of their nationality, and then because of their occupation. God left them in this incubator until they were a strong nation, able to possess the land that he had promised to their forefathers. Joseph's family in Egypt, chapter Genesis 47, 1-5 of Joseph's brothers told Pharaoh that they were shepherds. He responded as expected by telling them to settle in the lush pasture of Goshen. He also asked Joseph to find some compliant men from among his relatives to tend the royal herds. Genesis chapter 47, verse 7, verse 12. Joseph arranged for his father, then 130, to be present to Pharaoh. The fact that Jacob blessed Pharaoh means that this obscure Jew was greater than the Paladin of Egypt, because the lesser is blessed by the greater. Hebrews chapter 7, verse 7. Jacob said that his days had been few and evil, and actually he had brought most of the evil upon himself. Joseph settled his family in the best part of Egypt and provided all they needed, and then theirs was truly the more abundant life. Genesis chapter 47, verse 13, verse 26. When the people of Egypt and Canaan had spent all their money for food, Joseph accepted their livestock in payment, and then later brought all the land except that belonged to the Egyptian priests, and gave the people seed with which to plant crops, and charged them 1/5 of the crop for land rental, a very fair arrangement. Genesis 47, verse 27, verse 31. As Israel knew the end of his life, he made Joseph promise to bury him in Canaan, and then he bowed himself on the head of his bed, or the top of his staff. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21. And actually the same Hebrew consonants can be read either bed or staff, depending on which vowels are supplied. The traditional Hebrew text reads bed, but here the substitute quoted in Hebrews passage reads staff. Kidner comments, while both versions have bed, at 48 verse 2, the present occasion tells of Jacob before his last illness. 48 verse 1, and staff may well be the right meaning. It would be an appropriate object to mention as the symbol of his pilgrimage, his grateful words. In verse 32 and 10, worthy of the promises received in the New Testament passage, and thus the explainer was to end his life in the act of worship. He is the only hero of faith of Hebrews 11 to be commended as a worshiper, and he had come a long way by the grace of God and would soon go out in a blaze of glory. Sorry. Genesis chapter 48 to 49, 50. So, Genesis 48. Jacob blesses Manasseh and Ephraim. One day, not long after this word came to Joseph, your father is failing rapidly. So Joseph went to visit his father, and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And when Joseph arrived, Jacob was told, your son Joseph has come to see you. So Jacob gathered his strength and sat up in his bed. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, I will make you fruitful, and I will multiply your descendants. I will make you a multitude of nations, and I will give this land of Canaan to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And now I am claiming as my own sons these two boys of yours, Ephraim and Messiah, who were born here in the land of Egypt before I arrived. They will be my sons, just as Reuben and Simon are. But any children born to you in the future will be your own, and they will be inherit land within the territories of their brothers Ephraim and Messiah. Long ago, as I was returning from Padan Aram, Rachel died in the land of Canaan, and we were still on our way, some distance from Ephraim, and that is Bethlehem. So with great sorrow I buried her there beside the road to Ephraim. And then Jacob looked over at the two boys. Are these your two sons? He asked. Yes, Joseph told him. These are the sons God has given me here in Egypt. And Jacob said, bring them closer to me so I can bless them. Jacob was half blind because of his age and could hardly see. So Joseph brought the boys close to him, and Jacob kissed and embraced them. Then Jacob said to Joseph, I never thought I would see your face again, but now God has let me see your children too. Joseph moved the boys who were at their grandfather's knees, and he bowed with his face to the ground, and then he pushing the boys in front of Jacob. With his right hand he directed Ephraim toward Jacob's left hand, and with his left hand he put Manasseh at Jacob's right hand. But Jacob crossed his arms as he reached out to lay his hands on the boys' heads. He put his right hand on the head of Ephraim, though he was the younger boy, and his left hand on the head of Messiah, though he was the firstborn. And then he blessed Joseph and said, May the God before womb my grandfather Abraham, and my father Isaac, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this very day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, may he bless these boys and may they preserve my name in the names of Abraham and Isaac. And made the descendants multiply greatly throughout the earth. But Joseph was upset when he saw that the father placed his right hand on Ephraim's head. So Joseph lifted it up to move it from Ephraim's head to Messiah's head. No, my father, he said. This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused. I know, my son, I know. He replied, Messiah will also become a great people, but his younger brother will become even greater, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations. So Jacob blessed the boys that day with this blessing. The people of Israel will use your names when they give a blessing, and they will say, may God make you as prosperous as Ephraim and Messiah. In this way, Jacob put Ephraim at the head of Messiah. And then Jacob said to Joseph, look, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and will take you back to Canaan, the land of your ancestors. And beyond what I have given your brothers, I'm giving you an extra portion of the land that I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow. So Genesis chapter 49 now. Jacob's last words to his sons. And then Jacob called together all his sons and said, gather around me, and I will tell you what will happen to each of you in the days to come. Come and listen, you sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, the child of my victorious youth. You are first in the rank, the first in power, but you are as unruly as the flood, and you will be first no longer. For you went to bed with my wife, and you defiled my marriage couch. Simon and Levi are two of a kind. Their weapons are instruments of violence. And may I never join in their meetings, and may I never be a party to their plans. For in their anger they murdered men, and they crippled oxen just for sport. A curse on their anger, for it is fierce. A curse on their wrath, for it is a cruel. I will scatter them among the descendants of Jacob, and I will disperse them throughout Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. You will grasp your enemies by the neck. All your relatives will bow before you. Judah, my son, is a young lion, and that was finished eating its prey. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, and not the rear staff from his descendants until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all nations will honor. He ties his foal to a grapevine, the colt of his donkey to a choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, his robe in blood of grapes. So it represents Christ. He ties his foal to a grapevine, the colt of his donkey to a choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Zebulun will settle by the seashore, and will be a harbor for ships. His borders will attend to Sidon. Issachar is a sturdy donkey resting between two saddle packs. When he sees how good the countryside is and how pleasant the land, he will bend his shoulder to the load and submit himself to hard labor. Dan will govern his people like any other tribe in Israel. Dan will be a snake beside the road, a poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse hooves. So its rider is thrown off. I trust in you for salvation, O Lord. God will be attacked by marauding bands, but he will attack them when they retreat. Asher will dine on rich foods and produce food fit for kings. And Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. And Joseph is the foal of a wild donkey, the foal of a wild donkey at a spring, one of the wild donkeys on that ridge. Archers attacked him savagely, and they shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained intact, and his arms were strengthened by the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, by the shepherd, the rock of Israel. And may the God of your father help you, and may the Almighty bless you with the blessing of the heavens, by the shepherd, the rock of Israel, sons of Christ. May the God of your father help you, and may the Almighty bless you with the blessing of the heavens above, and the blessings of the watery depth below, and the blessings of the breast and womb. May my fatherly blessing on you surpass the blessing of my ancestors, reaching to the heights of the eternal hills. And may these blessings rest on the head of Joseph, who was the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a robber's wolf, devouring his enemies in the morning and dividing his plunder in the evening. And these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is what their father said as he told his sons goodbye. He blessed each one with an appropriate message. Genesis 49, verse 29. Jacob's death and burial. Then Jacob instructed them, soon I will die and join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and grandfather in a cave in the field of Abraham and the Hittite. This is the cave in the field of the Malabat near Mamre and Kinning that Abraham bought from Ephraim the Hittite as a permanent burial site. And there Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried, and there I buried Leah. It is the plot of land in the cave that my grandfather Abraham bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished his charge to his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and bred his laugh and joined his ancestors in death. So 50. Genesis 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. And then Joseph told the physicians who served him to go embalm his father's body. So Jacob was embalmed. The embalming process took the usual 40 days, and the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days. And when the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, please do me this favor and speak to Pharaoh on my behalf and tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, listen, I am about to die, and take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself. So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I will return without delay. Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. Go bury your father as he made you promise, he said. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and he was accompanied by all of Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officers of Egypt. Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and other households, but they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. A great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. And when they arrived at the threshing floor at Atad near the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn memorial service with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. And the local residents, the Canaanites, watched them mourning at the threshing floor at Atad. And then they renamed that place, which is near the Jordan, Abba Mizraim, for they said, this is the place of deep mourning for these Egyptians. Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them, and they carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near the Mamre. This is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. Genesis 50, verse 14. Joseph reassures his brothers. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we done to him. All the wrong we did to him, they said. So they sent this message to Joseph: before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. And then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. But Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me, and my God, that I can punish you. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for the good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he rescued them by speaking kindly to them. Genesis chapter 50, verse 22, the death of Joseph. And so Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt, and Joseph lived to the age of 110. And he lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Messiah, son of Machir, whom he claimed as his own. And soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph did. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Genesis chapter 48, verse 1, verse 7. Jacob's blessing of Joseph's sons chapter. When Joseph was told that his father was sick, he hurried to his bedside with Ephraim and Messiah, the dying patriarch, sat up on his bed and adopted his 2 grandsons as his own. By doing this, he arranged that the tribe of Joseph would receive a double portion of the land of Canaan when it would be divided among the tribes years later. Joseph thus received a birthright as far as the territory was concerned. Any offspring born to Joseph after them would be Joseph's, not Jacob's, and would dwell in the territories allotted to Ephraim or Messiah. Verse 7 explains why Jacob wanted to adopt Joseph's sons as his own. They were his grandsons by his beloved wife Rachel, who he felt had died so prematurely. Genesis chapter 48, verse 8, verse 22. Then Jacob blessed the grandsons, giving the birthright to Ephraim, who was the younger Joseph. Joseph tried to correct this in favor of Messiah, the firstborn, but Jacob said that he had done this intentionally. What memories must have gone through his mind as he, by faith, gave the blessing to the younger. Years earlier, his own father had unknowingly blessed him, the younger, but now he was blessing the younger, not through ignorance, but because he was in touch with God who holds the future. Israel had faith that his descendants would One day returned to the promised land. Jacob gave Joseph a mountain slope, which he captured from the Amorites. Perhaps this refers to the area containing the well that came to be known as Jacob's well in John chapter 4, verse 5. Jacob prophecy concerning his sons, chapter 49. Genesis chapter 49, 1 verse 2. Jacob's last words were both a prophecy and blessing. Reuben, as the firstborn son, represented the primacy of his father, manly strength and procreation, and held the place of power, dignity. The birthright with its double portion belonged to him, but he forfeited his permanence because he boiled over with dark passion and sinned with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Genesis 49, verse 5, verse 7, because these brothers had cruelly killed the men of Shechem and Hamstrung and Ox, Simon and Levi would be dispersed in Jacob and scattered in Israel. By the time of the second sentence in Numbers 26, these were the two smallest tribes, and this was also fulfilled when the tribe of Simon was largely absorbed by Judah, Joshua chapter 19, verse 1, verse 9. And the tribe of Levi was assigned to 48 cities throughout the land. Jacob cursed their cruel deception, but not the people of these two tribes themselves. Genesis 49, verse 8, verse 12. Judah, meaning praise, would be praised and respected by his brothers because of his victorious over his enemies. He is likened to a lion that goes forth to capture prey, then returns to well deserve rest that no one dares to disturb. Just as Joseph inherited the birthright with regard to territory, so Judah inherited it with regard to government rulership. Will continue in this tribe, still Shiloh, the Messiah, came in him. It would remain forever. His people would give him willing obedience in the day of his power. The meaning of the name Shiloh is to serve. Some suggested meaningless. The meanings are Prince of Peace, trencher seed of Judah. His descendant who is it? Ezekiel chapter 21, verse 27. Genesis 49, verse 13. Zebulun would enjoy prosperous from her maritime commerce since this tribe's territory in the Old Testament was landlocked. This prophecy may look forward to the millennium. Genesis 49, verse 14, verse 15. Israel is likened to a strong donkey, so contact to the rest and pleasant pasture surrounding that it had no will to fight for a penance, and so became subject to the enemy's yoke. Genesis 49, 16, 18. Dan, true is the tribe name, would concern itself with judging the people. Verse 17 is difficult. It may allude to Dan's introduction to the adultery, which caused the nation to fall in Judges chapter 18, verse 31. Many think that it is a veiled reference to the Antichrist springing from Dan, and that this is why the tribe goes unmentioned in 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 3 and 8, verse 40. In Revelation chapter 7, verse 3, verse 8, and verse 18, Jacob injects a prayer for the final deliverance of his people from their foes or for his own deliverance. Genesis chapter 49, verse 19, God unprotected in its territory. Naphtali is Genesis chapter 49, verse 21. Naphtali is likened to a doe that has been released from a confinement. It springs forth with tremendous speed to carry the good news. All the disciples except the traitor came from the territory of Naphtali, and much of the Lord's ministry was there. Matthew chapter 4, verse 13, verse 16. Genesis chapter 49, verse 22, verse 26. Compassing the territories of Ephraim and Messiah, Joseph is the fruitful, sending out blessing far beyond or his own borders. He was the object of bitter hostility, but he did not come forth. God blesses Joseph with rain, obedience, wells, and Goshen springs, and numerous progeny. Jacob humbly felt that he had been blessed more richly than his ancestors, and now he wishes that such blessings might come to Joseph, the one who was separated from his brothers. Genesis chapter 49, verse 27. Benjamin, a tribe of fighters, would continually conquer and divide the spoil, and someone has said that Benjamin proved himself the most spirited and warlike of all tribes all the tribes. Genesis chapter 49, verse 28, verse 33. In closing, Jacob instructed his sons to bury him in the cave of Malepath. I don't know that word. Burial place of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Leah. Then he drew himself back into the bed and breathed his last breath. Death of Jacob and of Joseph in Egypt. Genesis chapter 50. Genesis 50, verse 1, verse 14. Even the Egyptians mourned for 70 days. When Jacob died, his body was embalmed by the palace physicians, and then Pharaoh gave Joseph permission to occupy the body back to Canaan with a great procession of officials, relatives, and servants. They stopped east of the Jordan and mourned for 7 days so deeply that the Canaanites called the place of Abel Mizraim, the meadow or mourning of Egypt, following the burial in the cave and Mary of Hebron. Joseph and his entourage returned to Egypt. Genesis 50, verse 15, verse 21. Now that Jacob was dead, Joseph's brothers feared that he might seek revenge on them, and they sent word to him, claiming that their father Jacob had left word that Joseph should forgive them. Joseph disclaimed any intent to seek revenge or to judge, since that was God's prerogative. He further relieved their fears with the memorial words, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for the good." Genesis 50, verse 22, verse 26. Joseph was apparently the first of the 12 sons of Jacob to die, and this was 54 years after his father's death. His faith that God would take the people of Israel back to Canaan is lodged in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22. He gave instructions that his bones be buried in the land. It has been pointed out that Genesis opens with God's perfect creation and closes with a coffin in Egypt. It is a book of biographies, whereas the two chapters are devoted to an account of the creation of the heavens and earth. 48 chapters are largely concerned with the lives of men and women, and God is interested primarily in people, with a confident challenge to those who know him. Exodus is introduction to those who follow theologically as SNO the recital of the savings acts of God. Exodus 1:15 gives the supreme example around which the rest of the biblical narrative can be assembled to those who see the Old Testament as the product of the worshiping life of the community. At the heart of the book of Exodus lies the account of the institution of the Passover, greatest and most characteristic of Israel's festivals. To those who see God's Torah, his law, as essential to the life and thinking of later Israel, Exodus enshrines the law giving and contains the very kernel of the law in the form of the 10 Commandments. Enoch placed in the canon Exodus the way out in Greek picks up the narrative of the Israelites after the death of Joseph, and the foundations of the Jewish religion in the Passover are rooted in Israel's escape from 4 centuries of slavery in Egypt. But only after stubborn Pharaoh has defied the God of the Hebrews and has had to suffer 10 dreadful plagues on his nation in the Bible picture of the world. The narrative of the Red Sea crossing, many other marvelous miracles, the giving of the law on Mount Sinai, and the detailed instruction for the tabernacle complete this wonderful book. Our worship, we hold to the traditional Jewish and Christian view that the second book of Moses, like the rest of the Patriarch, is actually by Moses for a defense of this poaching. See introduction to the Pentateuch. Bible scholars have set the date of Exodus from Egypt as early as 1580 BC and as late as 1230 BC. 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1 says that the Exodus took place 40 years previous to Solomon starting to build in the temple. Since this was about 960 BC, it would place the Exodus at 1440 BC, the more conservative date, and many scholars maintain that the archaeologically better supports a later date, 1290 BC. But other archaeological finds seem to fit the early date, and we cannot be sure of the exact date, of course, but all things considered, the early date of 1440 for the Exodus event and somewhat later date for the book of Exodus seems best. As Exodus opens, we find the Israelites in Egypt where we left them at the end of Genesis. But the background has changed completely. It is over 4 centuries later. The once favored Hebrews are now slaves. Making bricks for Pharaoh, vast building programs. The themes of Exodus are redemption and the founding of the nation of Israel. For over 3,400 years, Jews the world over have celebrated this event, the escape from Egypt by power and by blood, and the beginning of the people of Israel as an actual nation in the Passover. The Christian Lord's Supper also celebrating the redemption of God's people by power and the blood grows out of the Passover, both historically and theologically, and to a certain extent the bread and wine of the communion hark back to the same elements in the Passover ritual. After the exodus from Egypt, the scene changes to the wilderness where Moses receives God's law for his people. And nearly half of the book concerns the tabernacle and its priesthood, chapters 25 verse 40. These details are not merely historical. To really enjoy the book of Exodus, we need to look for Christ in it. Moses, the Passover lamb, the rock, and the tabernacle are only a few of the type symbols of the Lord Jesus, many of which are referred to elsewhere in Scripture. See, for example, 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7 and 10 verse 4, and Hebrews chapter 3:10. May the Lord do for us what he did for the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, interpret to us in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Luke chapter 24 verse 27. Okay, I know